Week 4 of college football is now all done and dusted. This was the last real weeks for teams to show up against their stronger opponents before they moved to conference play, and oh boy did some of them take advantage of that opportunity. Not only did we have playoff-defining moments out of conference, but there were plenty of close games between G5 opponents to go along with it too. Welcome to Groupies, a little video series where I recap all of the shenanigans that happened in the G5 world of college football, because now that the final week of real non-conference play is finished up, there are a couple of teams that have now established themselves as the front runners. Most of the excitement this week happened between other G5 teams, but that doesn't mean that there were a couple of games out of conference that defined how we're going to see the playoff picture. Out of the 43 games that happened this week, let's do a quick rundown of the 22 games that had some sort of significance. Alrighty, on Thursday we had Rice coming over to Charlotte, and it was always going to be favored towards Rice. With all due respect to the 49ers, they certainly kept it close for at least the first half, but Rice was able to get the jump on them after the halftime break and run away with the game. This was mainly thanks to their running backs who recorded nearly 300 yards for them. And Rice, for the first time since 2001, are now starting off 3-1. On Friday, though, it was not expected to be something like that. Tulsa is going to be coming into Stillwater to face Oklahoma State. Now, Tulsa is a decent team, but Oklahoma State isn't no pushover, even if they don't have an FBS opponent win yet. So, what exactly happened this game? While Oklahoma State was the first team on the board, the Tulsa defense was something different. The Cowboys were practically suffocated by the defense, all while they were doing their absolute best to get as many points as possible. Tulsa will only record their first significant stake at the third quarter when they fumbled the ball, but they still were able to hold back Oklahoma State. Yes, the Cowboys almost came back, but don't let the score fool you. Tulsa had them locked down almost the entire time. The biggest weapon when it came to Tulsa is surprisingly their kicker, Seth Morgan, who he himself contributed 13 points on the night. That is more than what the Oklahoma State would score. And so, for the first time in Mike Gundy's tenure as head coach, for the first time since 1998, for the first time in Stillwater since 1951, the Tulsa Golden Hurricanes would come out on top. That was also the final straw for Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State. Not only avoiding elimination, but getting a massive power conference win before they venture into the American. Okay, with the weekday games out of the way, let's get into the juicy stuff. We start off with North Texas versus Army. This game looked very one-sided until Army out of nowhere kicked it into high gear, and they made North Texas give up a 28-7 lead, and it was 38-all going into overtime. Army was stopped on their first drive, and Caleb Hawkins, who already contributed 4 touchdowns on the night, would run it in to seal the deal for North Texas, now starting off 4-0. This has been a really impressive showing for them so far, and if you look at their conference play, their hardest opponent is South Florida. Yes, they don't have the strongest resume ever, but this is a team that can easily go 12-0. The possibility of that happening is starting to let some people put their eyes on them, so it's going to be up to them to keep this momentum up. UNLV had a little bit of a scare when they had to face Miami, Ohio. They had not won a game up yet to that point, and UNLV was undefeated. The Red Hawks were off to an early lead, but a pick 6 in UNLV's favor would help at least a little. Eventually, Calandria and Dan Mullen got it together, and it would be a very competitive game. Eventually, Miami, Ohio would surrender their entire lead, which led to a late field goal by UNLV, which would put them up, and that would win them the game. Defense was really weird this game, but overall, the offense still needs some work on both sides. Here is a big one now. Memphis at 3-0 is going to be hosting Arkansas, who has some playoff aspirations of their own. This game was always going to be close, but for the first half, it seemed like Arkansas would securely win this game. Down 28-10 with about a minute to go in the first half, it just shows that there is a difference between the American and the SEC. Until there wasn't, as Brandon Lewis and Cortez Braham Jr. started connecting and would give them an easy touchdown to end the half. Suddenly, it seemed like Silverfield was out coaching Pittman. Arkansas would not find the end zone after the halftime break, while Memphis was doing everything they could to get as many points as possible. After they held the Razorbacks to a punt on a 5-minute drive, Memphis would easily score in for their first touchdown of the fourth quarter, this time taking the lead. But Arkansas had one more chance. If they could easily run the clock down and score a field goal, the game would be theirs. With 10 yards to go and victory in sight, the Razorbacks fumbled the ball, and Memphis would defend their home territory with a score of 32-31, moving up to 4-0. While they had a huge mountain to climb with that comeback, it is still an impressive victory nonetheless, and they themselves could be established as a frontrunner if they can keep it clean all the way down to the South Florida game. It seems like UConn is always going to be playing close games this season, this time with a victory over Ball State. Considering that you played competitive with Syracuse, it isn't exactly a good look, but at least you have Cam Edwards and Skylar Bell on your side. The score was 17-0 for Buffalo with nearly 10 minutes left to go in the fourth. If the previous games with them wasn't enough though, there's a reason why you don't underestimate the Trojans. Troy pulled out all the weapons they could, and with a minute to go, they ended up scoring the game-winning touchdown. As they were up by 4, even if they scored all of their points in the fourth quarter, it was enough to take down the MAC championship contending Buffalo. And they would become the first victim to be eliminated this Saturday. Eastern Michigan has had a tough season so far, but right now they're playing competitive with Louisiana. They have been able over the course of the day to swing momentum into their favor, until Louisiana gets the game-tying touchdown. They had just missed a field goal on their previous drive, and now with 40 seconds to go, they have to go all the way down to try again. After a massive pass from Noah Kim to Joshua Long, they were able to set themselves up for a 42-yard field goal, which they made. Although this game was even, some crucial defensive stops made it so Eastern Michigan has their first win of the season. Liberty was on the teetering edge of elimination if they didn't win this game, but the James Madison quarterback Barnett III made sure they were the ones that would win this game. After putting up nearly twice the amount of yardage as Liberty did, a back-and-forth game would go in the favor of the Dukes in the third quarter, leading to a 31-13 blowout. Not only did they remain alive in the playoff race, they also knocked Liberty out of it. Toledo had a 13-0 lead near the end of the third when Western Michigan scored their first touchdown of the game. Keep in mind, Western Michigan was 0-3 at that point. Neither offensive line was at their best. But after a massive 4th and 10 completion that went down to the Toledo 5, Western Michigan was able to get a touchdown. With almost no time left, Toledo did not have an answer. This win shows that there's a lot of chaos happening in the Mid-American, but what Toledo didn't know at the time is that they are potentially the last MAC team that can make the playoffs. You'll see it later. Tulane had a lot to prove when they traveled to the number 13 Ole Miss Rebels, but there was simply nothing they could do to get themselves in this game. Jake Ratzlaff was held to only 56 passing yards, and the Tulane defense almost gave up 550 total yards of offense. Whatever defensive defects they had in the previous game certainly got exposed here. But nonetheless, it is just one loss and isn't too bad of a loss overall as they go into conference play. If they can fend off their tougher opponents in the conference, then they have an easy shot still of making the playoffs. Gardner-Webb was looking to upset Ohio by being competitive for nearly 3 entire quarters. Ohio is the defending MAC champion. We do not need another MAC team to fall to an FCS squad. But that skill set came in handy as Gardner-Webb could not fight off Ohio forever, and they strung together 2 scores in the fourth quarter, putting away the game. The scares do not stop here, with Idaho being very back and forth against San Jose State, who had yet to win a game this year. In reality, Idaho made San Jose State play behind nearly the entire game. But with 3 minutes to go, and with some very slow progress eating up all the clock, they were able to score the winning field goal and take away with the first win of the season. Kennesaw State was up 21-0 in the second quarter when things started to go wrong for them. Don't get me wrong, Odom and Benyard were amazing all game, but the Kennesaw State defense could simply not defend big plays. The Red Wolves made it a 1-score game in the fourth, but after it just became a 3-and-out battle. And with all the time wasted, it was enough for Kennesaw State to escape with the win. The evening game started with Boise State traveling down to Air Force in an emergency game that they absolutely needed to win. This game was always going to favor Boise State, but Air Force put up one heck of a fight. They got on the board first, but 3 unanswered touchdowns made it so that Boise State was up by 14. The score would be tied in the third, and Boise State would be playing the rest of the game trying to fend off Air Force. I don't have a problem with playing not to lose, but it seems like the Broncos were really doing that. But nonetheless, the game was sealed when they got a late touchdown in the fourth. And despite Air Force's best efforts, the Falcons could not stop from being eliminated. Nonetheless, this was a really competitive game, and it will be really exciting to see how all the teams shake up in the Mountain West, because this was definitely not a game that was expected to be close. Boise State could be in some trouble here. Who knows who comes out of the Mountain West as champion? Are y'all ready for some more Sunbelt action? Because there was some more delivered. Coastal Carolina versus South Alabama didn't have too much going for it, until 3 consecutive touchdowns made it a 7-14 half. Things would start going wrong for the Jaguars, especially in the fourth quarter, which allowed Coastal Carolina to convincingly win this game. While the Chanticleers quarterback Tad Hudson threw for 2 touchdowns, Bishop Davenport threw for 2 interceptions. While South Alabama isn't looking like one of the better teams in the Sun Belt, Coastal Carolina certainly is. With 2 teams currently in a rebuild, it was probably a better match than most people expected. Marshall quarterback Del Rio Wilson threw for 4 touchdowns this game, which is one of the reasons why Marshall was able to be competitive in this game. While everything seemed to be going in the way of Middle Tennessee, Marshall started getting some crucial defensive stops while they continuously kept scoring. While they were playing ahead almost the entire game, this is what got them over the hump eventually. I'll give a quick shout out to linebacker Parker Hughes on Middle Tennessee, who recorded 14 total tackles. It was not a good day for the quarterbacks at all. A recording of 0 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. What was the difference in this game? Big plays coming from Western Kentucky. Yes, their record isn't exactly the most impressive, but being 3-1, in what might as well be the G5 Chaos Conference, it is a pretty alright feat. Also, they have a lot to prove after last year. You got 2 teams here which no one really predicted would actually be at this point and be potential conference contenders, but here is an important game for both of them. The game started out competitive at first, but in the second quarter, Louisiana Tech took advantage of all of Southern Miss's mistakes to go up 30-10. Braylon Braxton produced over 400 yards of total offense this game, but the 1 interception he threw was the most costly, as Louisiana Tech returned it for a touchdown. Really, that was all that was needed for Louisiana Tech to win this game, and for Southern Miss's campaign to be derailed. Blake Baker, meanwhile, had an alright game on his own. His wide receivers did most of the work while the running backs finished them off. And that is how you start off 3-1 for the first time since 2020. UTSA had a little bit of issues when it came to Colorado State, but they were mostly in control of the game. It was a competitive first half, but the scoring was few and far between, and it didn't really impact the game until the fourth quarter. Down 10-17, Colorado State had to get into the end zone with 5 minutes remaining. That is something they were successful at, as they decided to go for the 2-point conversion to end the game right there. They couldn't get it. Instead of playing for possible overtime, UTSA won it right there. Once again, Robert Henry Jr. absolutely carried the Roadrunners. As for Colorado State, it was just a tough game for them overall. Unfortunately, the struggles that game would also leave them 1-2 on the season. San Diego State did not get off to the best of starts, but they have a tough game against California, a game in which they are 2 touchdown underdogs. The game was not even close. Things started to go wrong for California when they had a 10-minute drive that ended up at the San Diego State 2, and they didn't get any points out of it. Once the Aztecs scored their first touchdown, it was practically over for them. Keep in mind, California was undefeated at the time, and this was supposed to be an easy win for them. Instead, their quarterback of the future had their worst game that season, and they were shut out for the first time since 2019. San Diego State had not shut out an FBS opponent since 2016. The San Diego State defense was actually the hero for them, as the defense alone contributed 3 touchdowns, but there was also help from Lucky Sutton and Jordan Napier. With a thrashing of 34-0 at home, and with a Power 4 win, suddenly the San Diego State Aztecs don't look too bad. Finally, we end off this crazy night with a midnight showdown between Fresno State and Hawaii. This is both a underrated and a big matchup for the Mountain West this early. Everyone absolutely needs to be at the top of their game this time. So, how did the game go? Well, the first 1.5 quarters, let's say, not the best play ever. Nobody scores in the first quarter. And then there's a safety committed by Fresno State. and then there's a fumble return touchdown. Hawaii's up 9-0. Fresno State immediately gets their revenge, and that is a 9-7 half. By the end of the third quarter, the score difference remains the same, thanks to Hawaii scoring 2 field goals and the Fresno State touchdowns, which they failed the 2-point conversion. At this point late in the fourth, the teams have combined for 3 missed field goals, a fumble, a safety, a fumble return touchdown, and 2 interceptions. When will these mistakes catch up to either team?
Committed to the Air Force Academy. He's a fantastic story and a fantastic football player. This is another interception. Kavion Thunderbird, and he's going to run away from everybody. A pick 6, and Fresno State pads the lead.
This isn't looking good for Hawaii, and they turn it over on downs on their next drive. Luckily for them, Fresno State isn't able to get anything going, and they have 3 minutes left on the clock. Aliotto has not been great all day. He only has 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions, but this time he was able to drive themselves all the way down the field and score a touchdown. In order to tie up the game, Hawaii had to go for the 2-point conversion, and ultimately Fresno State stopped them short. Fresno State quarterback E.J. Warner was a beast out there for the Bulldogs. 268 total yards and a touchdown. While a lot of mistakes came from Hawaii's O-line, the Fresno State defense was able to get stops whenever they could. With the battle for the golden screwdriver complete, Fresno State sits on top of the Mountain West as one of, if not, the best team in the conference. With now their best wins so far in the season, who knows what they could be capable of. That will wrap up the game recaps of Week 4 of college football. Thank you all for watching, everybody. Let's get into the standings and the eliminations. Last week, we were down to our final 38 teams, to which this week 12 teams were eliminated, bringing us down to our final 26. Some teams I have already mentioned, some I will point out right now. A couple of teams do go down in the American with the likes of East Carolina and Temple. But besides the Rice victory and the Tulane loss to Ole Miss, nothing has changed too dramatically. These 6 teams during out-of-conference play have really established themselves as the contenders for the American. Who are the teams that are actually legit in this conference? We'll have to find out in Week 5. Conference USA only had 1 elimination with the likes of the Liberty Flames. Besides that, we have an already very chaotic conference. Western Kentucky is obvious, but Delaware in their first year, Louisiana Tech, New Mexico State at 2-1. Yeah, this is going to be really interesting to watch. While most of them are out of contention for the G5 playoff spot, all of them except Delaware and Missouri State can contend for the title. Who those teams might be the ones that go to the championship though? You might already have your answer. In the Mid-American, even if some teams got a surprise win, a lot of them also came up with a loss. Most of the time, these teams just faced really tough opponents, which led to the elimination of Bowling Green, Buffalo, Kent State, and Northern Illinois. This leaves Toledo at 2-2 to be the last MAC team to have a realistic shot at making the playoffs, but with a loss to now 1-3 Western Michigan, it isn't looking too good. As for the conference championship, Buffalo looks to be the best, with the other conference win belonging to previously mentioned Western Michigan. The Mountain West is now led by Fresno State with a 4-1 record, with eliminations coming towards Air Force, Colorado State, and Wyoming. I didn't really expect Utah State to be up here already, but as of recently they have been a contending midfield team, so we'll just have to see how it goes for them. And as always, we also have the 4-0 undefeated UNLV Rebels. The Pac-12, or the Pac-2 now, had Washington State eliminated with their loss in the Apple Cup, now sharing the same record as UConn. As for Oregon State, unfortunately, they've had a tough season so far, and they have yet to get on the board because of this. The Sun Belt technically has Coastal Carolina leading the East and Southern Miss leading the West, but the Golden Eagles was actually the only Sun Belt team to be eliminated this week. Nonetheless, they can still win the conference, but they'll have to face off some division foes like UL Monroe and Texas State. James Madison isn't too far behind in the East and will play their first conference opponent Georgia Southern, while Old Dominion and App State, both 2-1, will both go out of conference. As for the teams teetering on the edge, you got the 2 lost teams of Army, Tulsa, Toledo, and Hawaii, who are all at risk of being knocked off this week. The other 2 lost teams that are still safe for this week would be UAB and FIU. As for the undefeated teams, there are 4 currently remaining, 3 of which comes from the American. We'll see how they all stack up this week, but as it currently stands, statistically, they have the best shots of going to the playoffs. That doesn't mean don't watch out for those one-loss teams like Tulane or South Florida. And if you really want to throw in some dark horses, let's add in Old Dominion and Fresno State. Finally though, before we go, I think it's time that we introduce a new section called Team of the Week, or Groupie of the Week? I don't know, that sounds kind of weird. This obvious non-prestigious award will go to the Group of 5 team that played best that week. Awarding these retroactively and even now is not exactly an easy task, but I decided for this to at least have a maximum of 1 mention per team this season. Is that going to change? Very likely, but this is a pretty subjective award in the first place. As for the winner of Week 4, I am going to give it to the University of Memphis Tigers for defeating the Arkansas Razorbacks. Not only did this win help them increase their win total to 4-0, but it is a massive win over a Power 4 school no matter how you put it. And that, my friends, is how you become a front runner in the G5 playoff race. Now, after last week is when the real stakes get involved. We go almost exclusively into conference play. And from that point on, both the potential of chaos is at an all-time high, and not only will we see a lot more close games, but we'll see plenty of teams fall with them as we narrow down our sights to just 1 team. With our final 26 teams, thank you all for watching everybody, and I will see you all next week.